Umata, chapter 10. Umata hina yesh lahavin derech prat v'kol dalas ulamet zabiyah. Now that he told us that the Hitbonenut has to be done in derech prat, so now he's going to explain in the derech prat. Dahainu b'kol prat the Indian eses fear zabiyah. This is what he's going to explain, everything. Iris v'kelim v'tlapshutzim zeh b'zeh b'kol prateim. He's going to explain all the particulars. Gam b'kol sphira shemitchalekes l'prati pratius. More gam b'prinat chesed the malchus b'chochma shemalchus the chesed. 5 levels. That means any 5 levels. When you finish this thing, you should be able to figure out. And really, that means even 6 levels.
Right.
How everything is included in the Kesser of each world. So that's what is going to be explained in chapter 10 through the end of the book.
Right.
However, now that we're getting started, first of all, we have to get started with a certain thing. The source of everything. That the tzimtzum is called this mokam ponli. Before the tzimtzum, which is called the mokam ponli. Kam sham derech prat dafka, and over there we're also going to look in a way of a derech prat. Vahu anikra marach be'echad. This is what is meant, the inner meaning of marach be'echad. You know, HaShem Elokeinu, HaShem Echad.
Right.
You know.
Right.
The inner meaning of that means that he looks at length ba'achtus hapshuta dafka. In general, we divide it into 3 levels, and of course, we see that really it's divided into many more levels, because just this is the 3 levels of just the pnimius ha'or.
Right.
This is what he's talking about here. It's not even the ma'or he's talking about. The pnimius ha'or is going to be divided into 3 levels. And then the Hitpashtus ha'or, over here he's talking about the etzem ha'or. And really, there's, like we were just talking before, there's more levels. But in general, we're going to be talking about the Atmos Ein Sof here. The Kol Echad Kol Miyut Sfiros. Each one of them includes within it 10 Sfiros. Vahu, these 3 levels, Yachid Echad V'Kadman. We're talking this all is still inside the Atmos. So, Pchinas Yachid Mashmo'a Levadoi Mamish. Vahu Lamaila Mis Achdus Nifradim Shenikra Echad Kedua Ulafi Zeh B'Pchinas Ha'atzmis Mamish Lo Yitachan Leimer Adayin Inyan Eses Firas Klal. Malchus the Ein Sof. Shemela Muvan Shekadma Zeh Pinat Keser V'Chochma. Malchus means speech.
Right.
If you see speech somewhere, see there has to be a rotzen and a brain.
Right.
You can't have a speech without a rotzen and a brain. Ube'emes Gam B'Pchinas Ha'atzmus D'Oyer Ein Sof Shnikra Levadoi. It's included, and by the way, this thing that's called Levada over there. If you look in the Hill of Parasha, he says in Yochid, he calls the Ma'or and the Levad levels of Yochid.
Right.
In other words, over here, he's really talking about the most quitzonius level of Yachid, which is the most pnimius level of the Or Ein Sof. So even in the Atmos Or Ein Sof, Kal ba'atzma Yitzfiros, ach shnikra chachem v'lo b'chochm yediyah, which basically, chachem v'lo b'chochm yediyah means that not with a discernible chachma. it can be explained in different ways too, but the main explanation of that is that he is wise, but not with a discernment, not with a wisdom that can be separated out, so you can know that this is the wisdom.
Right.
That really, he has really, actually, it's not just that lo b'choch miyadah, it really is not really of these midos at all, just the opposite, that the midos come from him.
Right.
Not that they describe him in any way. Va'inyan, the ve'emes, k'moshe atzmus ha'en sof, hu or pasha b'tachlis ha'pshitus. Now he's talking about the ma'or. Kach mamish prinas eira v'ziva and nikra eira seif. B'haina hu u'shmoi bilvad. That means only him and his name, and he's not really, the bilvad here is like a total hint.
Right.
And
not really explaining it here.
It's not really explaining it. The pashut meaning is that there's only him and his name.
Right.
Means there is no other level. That's all there is.
Right.
But really, it's within a thing of the bilvad,
right.
And that's what the little parashah told us. So there's him and his name means that there's the atmos ein sof is who, and there's the oir ein sof is shmei, kanal, v'hu anikra tehiri, and this whole Indian, really, the tehiri law is everything before the tzimtzum.
Right.
Including Kadmon is also still tehiri law. It's not only Yachid, it's tehiri law.
Right.
Shezeo inyan abchinas hisgalus oir atzmusay k'moshe hu dafka. That is the revelation of the light of himself, exactly how he is. The actual revelation, exactly how he is. That means not only that. This in other places it explains that the etzem atmos orein seif means that this is really the revelation to himself.
Right.
This is still not the revelation that's going to go out to other people yet.
Right.
This is just to himself. This is not to anybody else. It's mamish to nobody. V'hu anikra yachid. This is what is called yachid. She'ein od milvadi. There's no more besides him. But again, remember that this ein od milvadi, this is really the most chitzonius part of the ein od milvadi.
Right.
This is the actual gilui of it.
Right.
Which can be called almost a pashtus of it. Loimar boy leshon his achdus, or leshon yichud, that you really cannot even call it a unification or a unity, because it's not shayach to be called that even.
Right.
It's really, even to call it yachid is wrong.
Right.
Because he just said yichud. Yachid is a lashon yichud. V'zeu antuchad v'lo b'chushban. It says antuchad v'lo b'chushban, and then the commentary on it is yud.
Right.
What chushban? It says you are one and not with a chushban, not with a mathematics. Which mathematics? Yud. It's not 10 spheros.
Right.
So why did he say he is wise but not with a known wisdom? Because this thing that we're calling chacham is not really that it actually describes him.
Right.
It's just that since he made people with inyanim of Chochmah and Bina, so therefore you have to say that he is a Chacham.
Right.
What do you mean you have to say that he's a Chacham? We just said that there is no Chochmah. explanation on this is that when you're saying that there's no chokhmah, usually when you say this guy has no chokhmah, it means he's stupid.
Right.
What we're saying that when we're saying on the Eibishter that there's no chokhmah over there, it doesn't mean a lack of chokhmah. It means the law of chokhmah yediyah.
Right.
It's not like your Indian of chokhmah. It's so far beyond chokhmah that you cannot say chokhmah over there.
Right.
And basically, the Indian of chokhmah, it's not just that you can't say chokhmah over there, but the whole Indian of chokhmah comes from him. So that not just that the chokhmah doesn't define him, he defines the chokhmah.
Right.
And the chokhmah gets everything from him, not the other way around. Like by a chokhmah, the whole thing that defines him is the fact that he's a chokhmah.
Right.
You know, that's one thing. Another thing is as far as the real Indian of chokhmah, like what we learned before of the base Kavan schooling. Chokhmah means also stupidity.
Right.
Same thing like Tainug. When you say Tainug doesn't mean pleasure. It means the power to have pleasure, or the opposite.
Right.
Means that the ability to feel pain comes from the kesef. Name is a kesef of Atik.
Right.
The same like the ability to feel pleasure, that's the ability to feel pain.
Right.
So the ability to be stupid, that also comes from him. So when you say Chacham v'lo b'chachma yediyah, you have to say also he's stupid v'lo b'stupid yediyah.
Right.
Not a stupidity like you think. It's like the Rebbe says, shtus de kedusha. So in other words, like nobody can beat the Eibishter. Like if you're going to play a stupid game, the Eibishter would win. You know, like they had a movie Dumb and Dumber.
Right.
If there was a contest, who could be the dumbest of them all, the Eibishter would win.
Right.
You know. So, and this is one of the things that we're talking about, the place. There has to be a place for stupidity. Think about it. Otherwise, you couldn't have a stupid person.
Right.
There has to be a place for his stupidity. You know?
Mm-hmm.
So the same thing, like he gives the existence to the Chokhmah that has, the Chokhmah means both things, both lines. Base Kavan Shkulim.
Right.
Okay. Mosh Nemar b'mikdash melech b'lshon ha'rizl atzma yemvua b'mokam acher ba'arichos. And this is explained in the Mikdash Melech, and basically this little blurb here is a reference.
Right.
It's a footnote. וזהו עניין כלולוס המיימר הראשון שבזוהר בריש אומן of the Malka גליף הוא בתהירי לה. פירוש בעצמוס גילוי עירו הפושט הנ"ל שנקרא תהירי לה, גליף הוא שעניין חקיקס אייסיאס. So he engraved letters, which later on we'll learn that there's the Rosh HaPashut, and within the Rosh HaPashut there's the Rosh HaMuchlat. And that's the engraving of letters. ובריש הורמנה, כשזה, כשעלה בציין HaPashut, שהוא בחינת הכסר, that he wants a certain thing, ובחינת האיסי שחוקק ובחינת המלכות, the Orin safe. Ve'im can, so if you're telling me like this, yes, Reish was safe. Kesser Malchus, Gam B'chinas Atzmus Ein Sof. Not only that, you have to say to the Chochmah, because how did he figure out how to make letters?
Right.
A dog can have a ratzon, and he can't write it. So you have to say to the Chochmah and a Bina, because to divide into letters, you have to have Bina.
Right.
And Mistama, if there's Bina, there's Midos. Ubi Uroi. So what's going on here? You just told us that there is no Keser and Malchus. Now you're saying there is. And
right.
Before you already did this several times. You said there is and there isn't. Ubiuroi she'ala b'machshav rotzna poshet ana emloch v'akol batzmus adayin. When it came up in the rotzna poshet ana emloch, and over here there's a little thing I always stick in, b'min nimloch m'nishmosem shel tzadikim. It's Emloch means I will rule.
Right.
Nimloch means consult.
Consult, right.
But it's basically the same word.
Right.
That the Ana Emloch, you can also say, who did he consult? Or also, who did he become a king? When he said Ana Emloch, there had to be the union of who was he Nimloch through.
Right.
And so you see that the thing is that the Nishmasayim Shal Tzadikim, V'amechulam Tzadikim, so you see that the Jews really, their Makor is higher than the Machshav Akduma, really.
Right.
The actual Makor of a Jew is even higher it's in the Ana Emloch. And really it's higher than the Ana Emloch because it says, B'min Nimloch.
Right.
Means that they gave the existence to the Ana Emloch.
Right.
They really preceded even the Ana Emloch. Actually, the Jews go all the way up. Vakol Batzmusa Adayin. This is still inside of himself. Kodem inyan mashishir ba'asam b'kayach davka kol mashi l'ratzam lucha b'gilui. This is still before he actually figured out. In other words, this is the Glif Glifu. The Glif Glifu also has levels. There's a Glif Glifu in Yached, the Glif Glifu in Echad, and the Glif Glifu in Kadmon.
Right.
And the Shiur is in Kadmon. The Glif Glifu of a Shiur, usually they say that the Glif Glifu is a Shiur.
Right.
But there's a Glif Glifu that's higher than the Shiur, like what he's saying here. He just said that this, we're talking about the Glif Glifu, and he says this is before the Shiur.
Right.
Not only that, he said this is Barosna Pashut. Not only that, we didn't get to Echad yet. We're talking about Yochid.
Right.
In other words, he's talking about the Glif Glifu in Yochid, means that in Yochid itself, there's also a Glif Glifu. That the actual decision for the Jew is in Yochid. Not only that, he also told you that the Atzmus Orein Sof of Yochid is the Gilui of the Atzmus exactly how it is.
Right.
That means that this really comes since there's a Glif Glifu in the Orein Sof. It means that really this came from the Atzmus.
Right.
Really it's the Eivisher that wants the Jew. Which if he didn't, the Jew couldn't have existed because he's the place of everything.
Right.
The light could not do something that the Eibishter would not give a place for.
Right.
You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So there's a Gilui, really it goes even higher than this. Even though it doesn't talk about it, we were only talking about the Atzmus Orein Sof, but really it goes higher than that. קודם עניין מה ששיר באס מקרח דווקא כל מה שלא עושה מלוכה בגילו והוא אחר הצמצום נקרא מקום פנוי. The shiur is what will be after the tzimtzum.
Right.
So basically what's exactly going on here? I mean, from one side we're saying that it's a perfect unity that has no parts, and then we're talking about parts.
Right.
והדימין בזה ידוע מככס הנפש, והתגלות מרצון עד המעשה, שישנם כולם בפרט בהלם אור עצמוס הנפש, נקרא בחינת יחידה. That the various powers, even though the yechida is a unitary thing, and it's not made up of powers, but nonetheless, you have to say that the powers are there. Al derech dugma, kasher adam hu chofetz chesed v'toiv lehete b'davar prat, שזהו בא מצד שיש במידה זאת לחופץ חסד וטוב בבחינת עצמו נפשו נקרא יחידה. Means that he is a kind person himself. Right. The himself is kind, but you say, wait a minute, how can you say that himself is kind? The himself is just the himself. It's not made up of midos.
Right.
Says, yeah, but it's not made up of midos, but on the other hand, if he is not kind, it's not that he is just him and there's different kind of add-ons. He himself is kind. So it means that there has to be a kindness that you say that even though it's not a separate individual thing, but you still have to say there's a prat like that there.
Right.
That's why you see that there's open chofetz chesed. Means that he is kind, and this is the whole thing. You can see this by schnorrers. You know that the schnorrers tell each other where to go.
Right.
So the one schnorrer says, "Oh, go to this. He's a good guy. He'll help you."
Right.
So you say, "How do you know he'll help me? Well, do you know the future?" He says, "Oh, I don't have to know the future. He's a good guy. That's why he'll help you." So he said, "How do you know he's a good guy? Did you see his goodness?" He said, "No, I didn't see his goodness, but he helped me, and he helped Shlomi over here, and he helped Jaime. So I figured that since he's helping everybody, so he must be a good guy."
Right.
Not that he has a kindness, because if you say he has a kindness, you say, well, maybe he lost his kindness today.
Right.
You know, maybe he got hit on the head and the kindness went away. He said, no, he's a good guy himself. That's what it means.
Right.
It means that it shows that he himself is a good guy. That's why this chofetz chesed comes into revelation from its hiddenness. That's why he helped me, and that's why he helped Shlomi, and that's why he helped Jaime.
Right.
You have to say, for sure, it's not that it's a kindness, like for instance, you say, yeah, well, what did he do for you? He says, well, you know, I needed shoes, and he gave me shoes. He says, oh, yeah? So what did he do for Jaime? He says, well, he needed a coat, and he gave him a coat. He says, oh, yeah, and what did he do for Shlomi? He said, well, Shlomi was hungry, and he gave him a sandwich.
Right.
So you say, so what kind of kindness does he have? He has a kindness for shoes, and he has a kindness for coats, and he has a kindness for sandwiches, but I need pants.
Right.
So do you know anybody he gave pants to? I said, well, I don't know anybody he gave pants to, but he has a kindness.
Right.
So if you go and tell him you need pants, he'll give you pants. How do you know? How do you know he'll give you pants? He never gave pants to anybody before. He said, why? Because we have to say that the chofetz chesed is nehiyuli. Liklo kol masha adilach was v'chesed v'toiv. Any kind of good thing.
Right.
If you go and ask him for pants, it's included in the hiyuli.
Right.
So we have to say, we have to say that a chesed for pants was included.
Right.
Otherwise, you see that the chesed for pants came out. If there wasn't a chesed for pants there, so how could it come out?
Right.
On the other hand, you cannot say that the essential chafetz chesed is made up of these different chasadim for pants and coats and sandwiches.
Right.
So from one side, you have to say that there's pants and coats and sandwiches there. And in the nimshol, you mamish have to say that, because it's not, in the mushal, there's not an actual sandwich in the chesed.
Right.
You can say there's a chesed for sandwiches.
Right.
In the chafetz chesed ayuli of a kind person, there is included a chesed for sandwiches.
Right.
But the sandwich doesn't come out from the chafetz chesed, because unless he's a rich guy, he won't be able to give him to just keep giving out sandwiches. Because the sandwiches are external.
Right.
And the nimshol, the actual sandwich comes from there.
Right.
And this is the thing that people tend to fail to understand. They see it as a more and more abstract, which in a way it's the same thing like by the chafetz chesed of the sandwich. You can't say there's an actual chafetz chesed of a sandwich.
Right.
It's ridiculous to say there's an actual. Never mind that there's a sandwich there, but there's a chesed for sandwiches there. It's stupid. It's not a chesed for sandwiches.
Right.
It's a chesed. But by the Eibishter, the same thing. Even though you can't say that the Eibishter has sandwiches up there, so you say, wait a minute. I ate a sandwich, and you told me to bench because the Eibishter gave me the sandwich.
Right.
So if he didn't have this physical sandwich, why should I thank him? Let me thank whoever gave me the physical sandwich. What? He had an idea for a sandwich. So what?
Right.
I don't care about the idea for a sandwich. I care about the sandwich that filled up my stomach. That's what I'm thanking him for, not for the idea of a sandwich.
Right.
And you see that you have to say a bracha before you eat the sandwich and after you eat the sandwich. Why? Because the actual sandwich came from there. That means that the Eibusher has sandwiches. And this is, in a way, it's a stupid thing to say, but in a way, it's a stupid thing to say opposite also. If he didn't have the sandwiches, where do they come from? So, you have to say that in the Chofetz Chesed Atzmi, it's a koyach hayul. It includes all the pratim yanim, whatever they'll ask from him. ואם כן בהכרח שקודם שאל ברצון בחסד זה שבגילוי להיטיב חסד בדבר זה הפרטי, היה קרוב בעצמי חופש חסד היולי. This chofetz chesed for sandwiches had to be included in the chofetz chesed ayuli. And as a matter of fact, you have to say it to a point that if this chofetz chesed for sandwiches was not included in the chofetz chesed ayuli, then the chofetz chesed ayuli is totally not a chofetz chesed. If you take the prat out, it means there's no chesed. Like, what does that mean? It means like there's certain foundations.
Right.
That they give shoes.
Right.
That's what they do. They give shoes. Now you can go to the foundation and drop dead on the floor from starvation. They will not give you a sandwich.
Right.
Why? Because their charter is to give shoes.
Right.
That's what they do. And even though, like, originally they might have started from some kind guy that really, if you would have gone to him, he would have given you a sandwich too, but he made up a foundation, and now the foundation gives shoes.
Right.
Doesn't give sandwiches. So is this a chesed? No, it's not a chesed anymore.
Right. Hold on 1 second, Yossi. Let me flip the tape. Okay, go ahead.
It's not that you can't call it a chafetz chesed anymore.
Right.
Because it will not take care of anything. It's not a goodness. It's not a goodness.
It does take care of shoes.
Yeah, but not because of goodness. And even though it originated with goodness, now it is just a bureaucracy. It's a bureaucracy. Like what happens in you see that a lot of these things, some of the worst, terriblest things in the world came out from a goodness, actually, like communism.
Right.
Communism came out, you might say that Marx and Engels were slightly misguided, but their original idea was that, people, everybody has certain needs that should be fulfilled.
Right.
But then it got separated. That's the whole Indian of Olam HaTohu.
Right.
That the original thing got separated from the Atzmos. So it's not a chesed anymore. It's a chesed of Toihu that will give shoes to somebody, and yet somebody can starve to death and it won't help them.
Right.
So the thing in a real chesed, if you say he's a real kind person, in other words, to this foundation, you can't say, well, these are kind people, and you'll go to them and they'll help you.
Right.
He said, but I don't need shoes. I got shoes. I need a coat. He said, well, sorry, we don't give coats. So that means that it's not a chesed anymore. It's just a bureaucracy.
Right.
So you see that not only you have to say that the prat is there, but if the prat was not there, then the whole chesed is not there. If this guy won't give sandwiches, or if you won't give shoes,
right.
If you say, well, he has all kind of kindnesses, but he won't give you a sandwich.
Right.
So you say, so he's not a kind guy. Whatever the reason that he's doing it is not for kindness. It's some other reason.
Right.
So you have to say that this Dover Prati was called Ba'asmis Chavas Hesed Ayuli, V'yasam Ayuli is called Dover Prati Zeh.
Right.
And the same thing you have to say like by the Eibusher. From one side you say the Eibusher is above anything. From the other side you have to say that the Eibusher has sandwiches.
Right.
If he doesn't have sandwiches, so how can you say he's the Eibusher? If he's missing one sandwich, he's not the Eibusher. Not only kosher sandwiches, he's got treif sandwiches.
Right.
And like what it says, Liya Kesef Liya Zahav. It's translated to mean Chesed and Gvura, but really it means literally.
Right.
That the Eibusher can actually, like when we ask him, in the Shemona Esrei, we say, "Give me money." They say, "What are you going to him for money for?"
Right.
He ain't got no money.
Right.
He says, doesn't mean that he ain't got no money. It means that what he's got is way past money.
Right.
Doesn't mean that he's poor. If he wants, he can give you money. It means mamish money.
Right.
Okay, so we were talking basically how in the Chafetz Chesed Atzmi Ayuli, it includes all the different particular things that people will ask from him. And I'm going to start from the third line here. Muchrach loymar. Muchrach loymar bevade shechafetz chesed zeh be'atzmut nafsho hu bebchinas koach hayuli ba'atzmius Lichloil and Hiyuli fashion, Kol Masha Adid Lachbot, V'chesa V'toi, V'kol Prate Prate Yonim Shivakshri Mena. Like we said, shoes, sandwiches, whatever. Not only that, if you say that a particular prat is missing, then it's not chesed. So you see that really, even though it's not really actually made up of the pratim,
right.
It's not made up of the pratim. You can't say that the chafetz chesed asmi of a person is made up of its tzonus to give sandwiches, and to give shoes, and to give clothing. You can't say that it's made up from that this is what defines it, because what it is chesed, is a thing of kindness. However, if you take out one prat, it means it's not chesed anymore.
Right.
And that's what it means, what it says in Pasuk Eliyahu, Kol man da'afresh chad mechavre. Me'elan asen sphira. And if you take out one sphira out, even though the atzmos is not made from the spheros, but if you take out one sphira, like you say, well, I'm going to take out chesed. Ki'ivu afresh bach.
Right.
It means that he made a separation, and it's not the Eibishter anymore. He's a kafir in the whole Eibishter. Like, for instance, if you say God is love,
right,
that means he's not din.
Right.
Like some people say, it's unconditional love. God is unconditional love. You say no, because if you say that, you're taking out the midah of din. The midah of din says there are conditions.
Right.
So if you take out the same, like if you take out, they say this guy does everything, he'll do anything for you, but he won't give you a shoes. I mean, if you're walking around without shoes, too bad.
Right.
So that's not kindness anymore. So even though it's not made up from the pratim of the 10 spheros, if you take out one sphera, it's no longer the Eibishter. It's kilo afresh bach.
Right.
The kol prate and yonim shivakshri meno ve'im ken bechreach shekoidim she'ala b'rtzona v'chesed zeh shebegiloi lehetiv chasa b'dover zeh prati haya kalo ba'atzmis chavos chesed ayuli. You have to say that the chesed for shoes was included in the chavos chesed ayuli.
Right.
The yatzim in ayuli lit galos b'dover prati zeh, and it came out from the Yuli to be misgala in this particular kindness.
Right.
Okay, I think that's where we stop. Ve'anu ro'im sheyesh b'chavetz chesed zeh sechol v'chochma amidus machshava dibur ma'aseh. We see that when the chavetz chesed of the Atzmius comes into actuality, so we see that there's a seichel. In other words, like when the person comes, he has to figure out, like, exactly how to do this chesed.
Right.
There's a seichel involved. Like, for instance, you think, wait a minute, this guy is coming and telling me that his family is starving, but I know that this guy's a drunk. And if I'll give him money, he'll go and spend it on liquor, and he'll come home and beat up his family, so I'm actually going to be making it worse for them to give him money. So what am I going to do? I'm going to send a bunch of food over to his wife.
Right.
Not to him. I'm going to actually bring the food over there.
Right.
So that it shows that there has to be a seichel. And then there has to be, in order to do the chesed, the guy has to feel, there's a midos, he has to feel a chesed and a pity in his heart.
Right.
And then there's a machshava. He has to think the machshava, okay, so let's do this, and a dibur. Like when the guy is asking him, he says, okay, I'll help you. So there has to be a dibur. And a maisa.
Right.
So it means there's 10 spheros. Seichel means chokhmah, and all the midos. Machshava dibur maisa is malchus. Im ken vaday b'mokar chofetz chesed zeh behelmok shaya kol ba'atzmis chofetz chesed ayuli gam ken mit chalkus sechol midos machshava dibur maisa shabai. There also had to be a division of these things. Otherwise, how could it come out like that?
Right.
The revealed chesed has 10 spheros, so the hidden chesed also has to have 10 spheros. אבל בבחינת עצמיות חופש חסד היולי, כמו שהוא קודם שבא עדיין בדובר פרטי, how it is in the actual יולי חופש חסד, הגם שבוודאי גם שם יש את חלקות שכל ומידות כולו, בכל מקום כלולים מתאחדים בתכלית. The same like the shoes and the sandwiches over there was not really two different chasadim. And it doesn't mean that they were misachdim. It means they were connected together to build up a bigger chesed. It doesn't mean like that. It means there really wasn't two separate things. It was only one thing.
Right.
And the same thing with the 10 spheros of the Sphira Atzmis, of the Chofetz Chesed Atzmi. And later on he'll say the same thing, the Chofetz Chesed Atzmi in the actual Atzmis or in Seif.
Right.
In other words, the kindness within the Achida of a person is not really separate any more than the shoes and sandwiches are separate, or any more than the 10 spheros of the Chofetz Chesed is separate. In the same way, the actual Chofetz Chesed itself is not separate from other spheros, and not really separate from the Atzmis.
Right.
So that thing of Chofetz Chesed is a particular sphera that he gives the example on, but he says, but really, that's just the example on this sphera, but really it's the Midah Prodis Acheret, Sheva Asmis is also like that. More Midah Sagvura, Vatiferes, Vanetzach, Kai Gavno. Like, for instance, a guy who likes to win, it's because he has the Midah Sanetzach in his soul. And also the same thing, like you can see that he likes to win all kinds of things. And you see that all the different pratim, and you see that to win, he has to have a seichel and a midos, like you see by a football game. That even though it's a stupid football game, but there's a strategy.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
That's the thing, when I talk to people, everybody here is into football. So they talk, I have no idea what they're talking about. And after they talk for a while, they look at me for my comment. Everybody makes their comment. I say, yeah, it's all strategy.
Right.
And they say, yeah, right, that's right.
Right.
It's all strategy. So it means, what it means, strategy, that in the Midas HaNetzach there has to be a seichel. And then there has to be midos. You know how they have the pep talk before the game?
Right.
He's trying to build up their midah.
Right.
And there's machshava dibur ma'aseh in the netzach.
Right.
And any of these mitzvahs, any of these midos, you can show a marshal on it. But the basic thing, he gave the marshal on chesed.
Right.
And by the way, I think he picked up chesed in particular because the world comes from the Chofetz Chesed.
Right. That's what he says.
There it is. All the way to Malchus, which is also the midah that the world came out from. Shehu midah zeis nasus. Shekalu bevadai miyud. That certainly there is also, same like all the other spheros, it's made up from 10 spheros. Like Ratzon, V'chefes, L'mlucha, the Keser, V'chochma, L'midos, Machshava, Malchus, Machshava, Dibur, Maisa, Chulu. Ach, Koydem, Shebal, Lepchina, Sidgalus, B'dover Prat, now he's talking about, he's going back to what he said before, the Ana Emlo.
Right.
How it was, which that's the Glif Glifu. That's why he came back to Dafka to Malchus, not the other spheros. That the Chofetz Chesed was the Inyan of this Arusa de Leila that brought the whole thing to have a world in the first place.
Right.
But the actual thing of the world was Nana Emloch, Malchus.
The Glif Glifu.
The Glif Glifu, which that's what the Glif Glifu is.
Right.
Which the Glif Glifu is Oisius, which is Malchus. And also, also it's the Indian of the Isnasus over another person, which that means Isnasus over another person, that brings about the whole Indian of the existence of another person.
Right.
And Melech Loam. So, but before it became his galus for a particular thing, Mo Limlucha Medina Zu Kahaigab. Now when there was the original Midas Melucha, which really existed even before the Glif Gliful. The Hiyuli for it existed before it actually happened.
Right.
Now, the same thing, like we said before, you have to understand, like in the Chavetz Chesed, there's no separate kindness, and there's no separate kindness for different things. And there's no separate kindness like that I'll be a king, so I'll be a king over telling people which side of the road they'll drive. And I'll be a king, I'll be the one that says where the dams will be.
Right.
And I'll be the one who says what the punishments will be for the various crimes, what the crimes will be, etc., etc. All these things exist in the Midas of Malchus Atzmis, but in the same way like we talked about before. The Himken, Muvim Emele, Shebchinas Midas Atzmius, Tekachav, Chagas, Nehima, Yulim, Sheba'atzmis HaNefesh, now he's going up. So it says, the same thing we understand, that in the Chesed, the 10 spheros of the Chesed are not separate from the Chesed itself. So the same thing, the Chesed and the other midos, the 10 spheros, Chachav, Chagas, Nehim, Ahiyula, Sheba'atzmis HaNefesh, Lo yitach and lo yimar gam loshen zeh shemitach mekulim ba'atzmis hanefesh anikra yechida. And then for sure you can't even say that the 10 spheres of Chesed are actually included or unified or something like that, because really they don't exist. There's just the Chesed.
Right.
And he said, but really the Chesed also doesn't exist. In terms of the Chesed and the Midas Asmios, they really don't exist. You can't even say that they're included in the self of the Yechida. There is no separate thing other than the Etzem. Same like there's no separate shoes in the Midas HaChesed. Kmo Midas HaChofetz Chesed HaYuli Anal Shemutpa B'tivis V'Atzmius Hagam Shu Chelek Echad Hanimshach Me'etzem HaNefesh Mamish Shalamalim Yad Chofetz Chesed B'Atzmius Shezeu Inyan Proti M'Mahusa Atzmis Apshuta B'Tachlis. So even though it's one part, and the same thing, like we said, if you leave the shoes out, then it's not a chesed anymore. The same thing, it's not just one part, it's an integral part. If you leave this part out, you're not talking about the Atzmus anymore.
Right.
But nonetheless, you can't say that this meter and that meter are unified together, and when they all unify together, like a plane. There's the wings and the wheels and the engine. When you put them all together, you have a plane. It's not like that.
Right.
And you can't even say that they're unified. They literally don't exist. In other words, there really is no such thing as chesed of the Atzmus, or even of the Or Ein Sof. There is really just Or Ein Sof itself. That's it.
Right.
In the same way as the soul. There's no separate thing of a kindness of the soul. There's just the soul. That's it. And yet, it has its parts to the point that if one of the parts is missing, that's not the soul. If you're talking about some kind of a thing which is missing, the midah of chesed, you're not talking about the Eibishter. Al derech dugma, koach haklatnua, shenikla, al mamish, be'etzem achai, koidim sheminil legamre. Like in your arm, there's a power to move. Like in your body, there's a power to move. It's not that there's like yourself and there's a power to move. It's just since you're there and you're alive, you can move.
Right.
It's not a different thing. He can jump, he can run, he can go to the right, he can go to the left, he can make all kinds of dances. You can't say that the koach hatnuah is made from running and jumping and dancing. It's not like that. Why? It was not even in a way or a definition at all of a tnuah.
Right.
It was not a movement. Lo bichlal, lo biprat. Actually, first he says, like we have to say that the klalim and the pratim are there. But on the other hand, not only they're not there, but it's not even from a sug and gather of that.
Right.
So we understand that the Yechida is not in a sug and gather of chesed or gvura or anything like that. And the same thing, certainly by the Orient Seif, that it's not in a sug and gather at all of Chokhmah or any of the spheros. Even though from one side you have to say that they're like parts of it, but actually it's not in a sug and gather, even like B'Koach HaTnuah, which this is something we're talking by an animal. Not necessarily by a soul of a Jew, but we're talking about the Nefesh HaBahamis even. We understand that in the Nefesh HaBahamis of the animal that enlivens its body, along with when it's in the body even, there is actually no movement there at all, even though the movements come out of there. But then kolol legamre be'etzem ruach hachayim, and now he's talking about not just the power of movement, but in general the whole pashas hachayos to enliven the whole body, which gives life to the whole body with a various body. When it's still in the etzem ruach hachayim, hagam shebegilu mitchalek l'riyah v'shmiya la'ayin v'eizim kai gav. Now that's where it comes from. Like it says, dead dogs don't bark.
Right.
So it means that the bark comes from the Nefesh HaBahamis. Because if the Nefesh HaBahamis is there, he won't bark. Or he won't move, and he won't see, and he won't smell. So you see that Etzem Ruach HaChayim is divided into various things like Riyah, Shmiya, Laim, V'Oiz Kai Gavna. שבוודאי גם טרם בו להתגשם בעין ואיז מפויל, היה קל בו חייס הראייה רוחניס לעין בפני עצמו, וחייס השמיע באיז מפני עצמו. Like you see that when you actually see something or hear something, you see by itself and you hear by itself. And it's the soul that does it, really. Because, like we said, if the dog is not alive, you won't see any word, it won't hear.
Right.
So it means that it's not just a mishmash over there. Even though you have to say it's one unitary thing, and it's not really a thing of hearing and seeing, not only just that they're not separate there, that they're unified, but they're mamish, totally non-existent in the fact that there's nothing but the Nefesh HaChaim itself.
Right.
And yet you have to say that these powers are kolul in the way that each one is b'pnei atzma.
Right.
Mikol mokem, koidim sheba etzem ha-nefesh l'klal b'chinas et pashtus hachayus, gam shekolul, even though these various powers are included in it, harei zeh ki yiskalus koach hatnuah be'etzem hachaya now, that it's not in a gather of shmiya riyah at all.
Right.
וכל מה שמוכן ועתיד לו ולגילוי בפועל החיוס עדיין ייתכן הייחוד והתקלות דריה ושמיעה, and when it's ready in the way of the pashtus, that it's ready to come into an actual gilui b'poil, there you can say a hitkalos of the various powers. Ukai gavna. Aval kasher kol legamar be'etzem hanefesh v'haya kelo yesh b'metzius, and it's like it mamish doesn't exist. Kolo yesh b'metzius is pashus chayus kolal. There is no, even in other words, even the pashus of the chayus is involved inside the etzem hanefesh in a way that is not existent. Klal uklal mitzad etzem hanefesh lamala harbe mipchinas pashus, because really the whole thing is just that there's etzem hanefesh. And the thing that there's eight pashas of chayus only comes from the tzad of the etzem hanefesh, which is really higher totally than a thing of eight pashas. Rak shekoil be'atzma gam ken pchina eight pashas, but it includes inside of it also the pchina of eight pashas, that it can spread out to enliven a body. The etzem hachay, like the animal, shekoil be'atzma ke'achat noah, that includes within it the power of movement and knowledge. Im ken, ech yitochem pchinat yichud itkalo teprat erbe chayut. So how can you say that there's a unity and inclusion of all the particulars over there if you're telling me now not only that they're not really included there, they're like totally non-existent there.
Right.
So are they existent or are they not existent? Which is where it goes back to what he said before. From one side we say Chacham v'lo b'chachma yediyah, and from the other side we say there's no Chachma there at all. It doesn't exist. Why? Rak mitzad she'atit u'muchan latzet b'tpashtus chayut b'tchalkut prate chayut, since we see that later on it's going to come out, so it means that it was ready within the soul to come out. It was available there to come out, because that's where it's coming out from.
Right.
So we have to say that all of these particulars are there in the Hitpashtus, how it's originally totally included in the Etzem. She'im lo ken, ma'ayin nimsu potem alala begilui, Hitpashtus. If you say that it wasn't there, so how did these particulars come out in the revelation of the Hitpashtus? If you say that the soul does not have the power to see, so how does the eye get the power to see? Not only that, we understand that really the eye does not see.
Right.
The eye is just like a instrument, like a camera, that just passes the light to this like film in the back of the eye type of thing.
Say the actual sight is in the back of the brain.
You can't say that actual sight is in the back of the brain, because really the brain is also a keli.
Well, obviously.
The brain is also just a conduit.
That's not what I meant. The center of sight in the brain is the back of the brain.
Yeah, that's the same like the center of sight in the face is the eye, not the nose. The same thing in the brain, there's also an eye.
Right.
There's an eye and an ear in the brain, which doesn't look like an eye and an ear. But really, that's also a conduit. Same like the eye is the conduit to the brain.
The brain is the conduit to the soul.
The brain is a conduit to the soul. And v'haraya, that a dead dog does not bark and doesn't see.
Right.
That means that the bark does not even come from the brain. You say, well, if you take his brain out, he won't bark.
You certainly won't.
He won't. But really, even with the brain still in, he won't bark.
Right.
If the soul is not connected to the brain, the minute that the soul is not connected to the brain anymore, everything will stop.
Right.
So it means that really all of these things are conduits, and it's really the soul that sees.
Of course.
Even though in the soul itself there's no separate power of sight, but you have to say because the soul does see separately.
Right.
In other words, like when you see, you have your proof from the way that you see and hear.
Right.
That you see separately and you hear separately.
Right.
Because if it wasn't there in the soul, so im lo ken ma'ayim tzo pratim malalo begilui, I'd pastor.
Right.
So in the As a hiyuli, for instance, to see the sofa and to see the table. So you can say, well, that's made of hiyulis to see round shapes and square shapes and various, you can see all these different things.
Right.
So I say, what about a sofa that some guy in China has that you never saw and you're never going to see? He says, yeah, the eye has a power to see that too.
Right.
Okay, but this is only...
exposed to it.
Huh?
If it would be exposed to it.
Yeah, but the thing is that the power to see that particular shape exists in the eye.
Right.
Already. And therefore it exists in the soul.
Right.
That means that that shape, all the shapes exist in the soul. Right? Okay,
right.
But that's really the power to see the shapes, not the actual sofa itself.
Right.
Right?
Right.
And the same thing, like when we say the rotzen of chesed. So we said the rotzen for a chesed of a sandwich, and the rotzen for a chesed of a shoe, but that's not an actual shoe.
Right.
It's just a rotzen for a chesed to give shoes.
Right. Whereas
that's in the muscle. But with the nimshal, the actual shoe is coming out from it.
And the actual sofa.
And the actual sofa. And the actual, all the emotions.
Right.
That a person has. In other words, both the going from the mental and the emotional. In other words, the whole thing, the whole abiyah, all the way, including the actual final physicality, is actually coming out from there.
Right.
So in other words, when it says Liyah Kesef and Liyah Zahav, it doesn't mean just the ability to earn money.
Right.
It means that the actual thing is coming out of there. And
right.
You have to say the same thing. You have to say this thing, She'im lo ken, ma'ayin nimso, protem halala begilui.
Right.
Where did my car come from?
Exactly.
If you're going to say, well, you can't say that in the Eibishter there's an actual car, said that's right. From one side, that's what we said here. You can't say that in the actual chesed there's a chesed to help somebody fix his car.
Right.
You can't say that. On the other hand, if you don't say that there's a chesed to help somebody fix his car, it means you broke the whole chesed. It's not a chesed anymore.
Right.
So if from one side, if you say that my car actually existed inside the Eibishter, it sounds kind of silly.
Right.
The Eibishter is not made up of cars. On the other hand, if you say that my car did not exist in the Eibishter, so it's not the Eibishter. So where did the car come from?
Right.
But the car came from another Eibishter. It came from somewhere. It's a car. You say, but it's physical. So yeah, right. And where did this physical come from?
Exactly.
You want to tell me there's an Eibishter, and then there's the physical world, which that's the mistake that the Rambam, Moir Nevuchim, says that's the mistake that the Greek philosophers made.
Right.
They felt that there's an Eibishter, and there's also a physical world.
Right.
So, but where did the physical world come from? So you have to say that it was also there.
Right.
And how can you say if there's nothing but the Eibishter? You say the same thing, like you say that in the Chesed Atzmi there was all the Pratim. All the Pratim are there.
Right.
But that's the prat of just a Chesed for a prat, not the actual sandwich.
Right.
In the Nimshal, the actual sandwich came out from there.
Right.
Not just a Rutzen to give a sandwich, which was really something separate from him.
Right.
So you have to say, Im lo ken ma'ayin so pratim alala begilui ha'pashtus. Kmo ha'or b'ziv shekol be'etzem HaShemesh sheyesh bo behelem kol prat ha'ef neziv ha'mitpashet. When the light was inside the sun, it already had all the particular things that what you see, like, in other words, when you go outside and you see in the sunlight, so you see the green and blue and yellow and whatever, it must have been already inside the sun.
Right.
Ukai gavna v'dala maven. So that's the end of this little section here. Okay. The Nimtza, so that was the general explanation of the whole thing. Now he's going to explain how this comes in 3 levels. Nimtza gimel madrega zuach hazu nimshach me'asmis hanefesh mamish hanikra b'chinas yechida ha'echad yud koichos asmim v'hiyulim Mo chafetz, this is the Indian of Yachid. Mo b'chinas chafetz chesed asmi v'hiyulik aigavna klulim ba b'tachlis.
Right.
Means the mamish don't exist. It's called koyach no be'etzem achai, and it's not just it doesn't exist. The yechida is not even in a gather and siag of them at all. It's not in a sug of being like that.
Right.
The koyach no be'etzem achai could call it pash achai be'etzem kanal, like we talked about before. But lo yetachem ba'am lo melashon is achad them dvar and dolim yachad. You can't even say it's a unification. It's like the mamish don't exist totally.
Right.
Klal, totally. Canal, like we explained before. So that's Yachid. Base Echad. Pchinat it partus yud koichet shemuchonim lova b'pchinas gilui. Already that it's a thing of it partus that it's muchon to come out in various ways like chesed or whatever of the 10 spheros. But this is gam koydem shenimshach v'poel mamish. Like when Avram Avinu is sitting by the tent.
Right.
In other words, that he's already muchon to have a chesed come out, but there's nothing coming out because nobody came yet.
Right.
So there's a point where it's muchon to come out to a prat, but you don't have a prat yet.
Right.
So it's just a thing, and that's echad. V'sham mitochen inyan it achdas kama pratim shabayit. There you can say that it's made of various things. And even there, it's not mamish really a unification. It's, in a way, it's really hiding the unification. In other words, you have to say that at some point, in other words, if these powers came out of the etzem where they totally didn't exist, you have to say there's a point where they started having a yecholis of existence. This is not an actual existence, by the way.
Right.
It's just it's an ability that it could exist.
Right.
So that's the echad. And there you can say that this ability for the things that exist is made up of a bunch of abilities.
Right.
And they're all unified together as a general inyan of itpashtus of the soul. What does it mean? It means that it's not only when it doesn't come. It means really even when it does come. When there's no heder and meniah and it actually does come. When you're actually doing something, really this gimel is connected to it. But it's dafka when it doesn't come from a heder and meniah, that's when you can see it. Like for instance, if you're sitting in a farbrengen and there's a bottle of vodka on the table and your glass is empty, and you're just getting ready to reach for this bottle of vodka, and the whole tnuah was already all there.
Right.
That the tnuah is already all there in the koyach hatnuah before he actually made it. That's why you don't have to grope around, you know.
Right.
He already has it all figured out exactly where his hand is going to go to and where it's going to end up, and he's going to grab the bottle. And just before he moved it, somebody else grabbed the bottle.
Right.
So there's two things you can learn from there. That really, you see, nothing happened. It didn't come out into an outside. It stayed a hiyui.
Right.
It never came out, and yet it was completely prepared to do it.
Right.
So it means
to do it. It's like he was about to do it.
Yeah, it was all prepared in there.
Right.
To actually grab that bottle. And so you have to say that, let's say somebody else would not have grabbed it and he grabbed it. That means that preparation is connected to the outside, to the actual grabbing. It's not that something else happened. It's this preparation which is connected to it. Right?
Right.
Even, in other words, what he's saying, a header, it's not lav dafka a header. That's how you see it, from the header and the maniyah. But the preparation is all completely lo chasarak lava b'poil mamish. Like to grab the bottle. Like to grab a bottle, for instance. Right?
Right.
Okay, but that means even if he did make the tnuah, it's connected to this third level. Okay, now what happened when the other guy grabbed the bottle and therefore the koyach hatnuah did not come into poil? So what does he do? He says to the guy, when you finish, pass the bottle over.
Right.
So you notice that same koyach hatnuah, which was really just the actual, in the essence of the soul, was just a desire to grab the bottle, which was really the desire for himself to get a drink of vodka, turned into the koyach hadibur.
Right.
And it's not a separate thing. It's mamish the same thing. Even in Kadmon, but there you can already say that it's a unification of powers that are unified like one. And you see that the koyach hatnuah turned into koyach hadibur.
Right.
And the exact same motivation that motivated him, and he was all prepared to grab the bottle, turned into the motivation to tell the guy to pass the bottle when he's finished with it.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So you learn both of these things from this. When it doesn't happen, you see one of the things is really, it's all prepared, but it's lav dafka that it has to happen. Even when it actually does happen, the thing of the hiyuli is still just a hiyuli. And the second thing that you see that one power can turn into another power.
Right.
Like when he is Mashayar, how much revelation of the Ruach HaChaim is going to be. And it's already included what he is atid lahachyot in poil mamish. Like for instance, when he's psyching himself up to run or something like that. So he's going to have an extra influx of a Ruach HaChaim. You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
In other words, when you're just going to do a real heavy action, so you have to, sort of get some extra life. Like they tell you, gotta wake up, liven up. We got, like they tell the soldiers, liven up. We got a big job ahead of us, you know?
Right.
So, Kumoiken, Dimyen, Kayach HaTzameach, Shemuchan LaSmiach V'Poel Mamish, the same thing, like the Kayach HaTzameach in the ground. When it's mamish already connected to a tree and it's ready to actually give this tree the power to grow. And each one of these koiches has these three madregas, and they're all connected even to the poil mamish. In other words, the poil mamish is connected not just to Kadmon, because Kadmon is connected to Echad, and Echad is connected to Yochid. That means when he's actually grabbing for the bottle, really he's grabbing it with Yochid, with Etzem HaYechida. And it goes through the two conduits of Echad and Kadmon, which means that there has to be a point where the powers come out, and it's not just Etzem HaYechida, since they're coming out in particular. And then it has to be a point where they're coming out not just in general, but in particular for this particular action where the action is mature. The hakol hu terem sheba dover adayim b'poel mamish. We're talking this is not the actual thing of when it's coming out to the poil mamish, and even when it is coming out to the poil mamish, this is the inner power which does not come into the poil mamish. כמו התנועה קודם שבאה בגשם הנפעל, או החייס הרוחני קודם שבאה בגשם הגוף, ששם משתנה מאס רוחניס למאס גשם. In other words, it actually comes into an actual tnuah. A tnuah is not anymore the thing of the soul. It's a physical movement. Vahu b'chinas tnuah gashmius, and it's a physical tnuah. V'achayis gashmius also. V'kai gavna b'geshem atzmicha. It's an actual plant. It's not the power of growth at all. It's a different thing. It's a plant.
Right.
It's like a piece of wood. That you have to make a kibbutz in the ruchni betchila. And the example on that is, did you ever see Abbott and Costello and the Wolfman?
Yeah.
Not
that I remember it.
The fat guy is standing there, and I can't remember who's Abbott and who's Costello. Abbott is the fat guy.
I think Abbott is the tall guy and Costello is the short guy.
Okay, right. Abbott is the straight man. Okay,
right.
So Costello is standing there, and Abbott is standing there, and the Wolfman is standing behind Abbott.
Right.
And Costello is going.
Right.
Why is he doing that? Because he is so panicked out by seeing the Wolfman that he cannot metzamtzem his speech into the particular oisius, but he wants to say the whole speech the way it is inside of him at one shot.
Right.
So therefore, since he can't make a tzimtzum, he can't make the particular thing.
Right.
And the same thing, this happens also, like, if you're walking down the street and all of a sudden a Tyrannosaurus Rex looms up over you, people freeze.
Right.
Why do they freeze? You should be running.
Right.
The reason they freeze is because it's such a big shock that the whole koyach hatnuah is coming out at one shot.
Right.
And he cannot make a tzimtzum which way to go.
Right.
Of a particular movement, but he's trying to make all the movements. He's trying to run all different ways at once.
Right.
And therefore, since he can't make the tzimtzum, he can't run any way at all.
Right.
And this is in many, many things. That if you can't make the tzimtzum, why? Because the koach haruchni is infinite. It's not for a particular movement.
Right.
And the koach hadibur is not for particular things. So that if he can't make the tzimtzum, which you have to make the tzimtzum all the way down to the letters.
Right.
That's also why people stutter. They're trying to put the whole machshava into the dibur at one shot.
Right.
And what you have to teach them is how to slow down and make a tzimtzum. So, in order to come from the spiritual to the physical, you have to make a tzimtzum. And this will be explained by Yossi Base in chapter 12. Okay?
Very good.
Yeah. Did you turn off the tape yet?